So let me just introduce Ben Horn. He's a consulting energy justice business and program analyst at the Minority Business and Workforce Division of Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the Department of Energy. Prior to joining DOE, he assisted in launching the Boston Reentry Collaborative, co-designed a modular plug and play micro aquaponics, patent pending system, and wrote the market and sales strategy with a Saudi manufacturing team, launched the finance curriculum as a USAID DAI subcontractor, leading the inaugural cohort of 12 accountants coaching 40 minority women-owned businesses across Afghanistan. For over 10 years, Ben worked to catalyze interfaith reform, coordinating dialogue and textual analysis in the original languages of problematic biblical and Quranic passages with indigenous faiths and leaders in communities suffering from high conflict, historic theocracies, and toxic polarizations in the United States and Middle East. Launched 4 separate small business incubators for impoverished communities across the Middle East, and throughout co-authoring curriculum project management and both teaching courses and coaching business owners in English and Arabic. He led the designing of sustainable solutions to Qatari food insecurity caused by the Saudi-led embargo, introduced, designed, co-built with appropriate sustainable agriculture extension programs through feeding Iraqi and Syrian refugees, co-founded a sustainable agriculture consulting firm assisting the tech transfer of research at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, taught ESL and social studies with Somali refugee students in Minneapolis through Teach for America. Is this enough? What I really love about Ben is that, as you can hear from his background, he's an entrepreneur, right?
I was before I joined government. Now
He was. Be very clear, he was. He is now lending his expertise, his knowledge, his innovation, experience to federal government. And that is exactly what we need to be able to advance innovation. And he's a quintessential example of food security is global security. He's a quintessential example of what you just heard from the administrator from rural utilities, where even in Afghanistan and various areas around the globe, you have no internet. HUD, we talked about community, housing. I want to close, let Ben take over and say that we at the MBDA have the beef. You do not have to look for federal contractors who are shovel ready, who are really needing to get contracts and grants so that they can scale, size, scope, and scale, and deliver and help us meet these equitable acquisition goals. These communities of color, Black and Brown, Asian, Latin American, businesses represent communities. So we have the outreach and the benefit plans. Thank you very much. Ben?
Thank you, Keith. And yeah, didn't know he was going to have to read that. So sorry about that. Thanks for taking it down. Yeah, thank you. I'll be introducing the panelists in just a moment, but I also wanted to introduce Justice 40. The Justice 40 initiative is one of the most important elements of President Biden's administration's executive orders. And I haven't heard much talk about it today or last evening. But also Justice 40 seeks to reverse some of the structural inequities that have created the mess that our societies face around the world, but specifically in America. So as many of you probably know, 40% of the overall benefits must come from Bill and IRA and investments in our infrastructure and our energy need to come and flow to historically disadvantaged communities. It's an executive order, so we'd like to see it stick around forever as a law, but as long as this administration is around, it will be here. And as we've heard, I didn't know that the MBDA was an executive order for 60 years or 55 years or something. This is mind-blowing. So maybe Justice 40 is one of those executive orders that can continue to be renewed until Congress does something about it, but we'd like to see it last forever. But basically, it seeks to allocate funding and resources more equitably so marginalized communities can have a fair share in the renewable energy transition. That's the basic idea. Now, there are many programs that we could talk about for hours within the Department of Energy of how that works and how that trickles down to local communities. My boss, Shaleigh Morissette, will be speaking more about that tomorrow. But that's just an idea. My role at the Department of Energy, I work with several different communities in my portfolio, especially fair chance hiring for folks coming out of incarceration, faith communities seeking to electrify their communities and the poorest congregants of their houses of worship, and nonprofits. I also work with commercializing a low energy nuclear company that's taken up a lot of time recently. I just came from working with their team in Arizona yesterday. And also agriculture. I have a green thumb, what I spent most of my time doing in the Middle East, in addition to the interfaith dialogue. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three panelists. One is Alex Johnson. We can start with Dr. Ramesh Koluru, actually, and then I'll get to the other two panelists. So he's the Vice President of Research at one of the top tier research universities in the nation, top 3% actually, ranked number 7 in the United States. It's also ranked number 2 in the country for solar research, the University of Louisiana Lafayette. They focus in life sciences, vaccine development, computing, AI, climate change and resiliency, energy, renewable energy, especially in economic development and entrepreneurship. So he's the Vice President of Research. He oversees all of these intersecting issues, and he'll be on the panel as well as Alex Johnson with the Department of Commerce. He leads the National Telecom Information Administration, NTIA. It's in essence a state-led and state and local implementation grant program in charge of deploying broadband to areas of need. And third of all, we'd like to ask Andrew Burke if you could also join us for the panel. I was told to ask you, even though it's last minute, just to continue to give us some of your wisdom. I was told that was too brief of a time, so if we could give a quick round of applause to our three panelists before we begin, and as they transition up.
Had the curry on the table here for the Indian on the group.
So I'd like to start with a question. Well, before the questions, I should say, I'm sorry. If each panelist could just give a 5-minute intro, maybe going left to right, and we don't need a full 5-minute intro from our last speaker. Maybe you can give a 1-minute version, but specifically an introduction of how your work applies to opportunity zones. So roughly 5 minutes, and then we'll start with some questions from myself and from the audience. So yeah, left to right, sorry. Yeah.
I apologize. Hey y'all, I'm Alex Johnson. Thank you for the introduction. And it's really an incredible honor to be on this panel with a former boss of mine and at NTIA, and also with my favorite boss of all time, Don Cravens, Jr., and to be with Secretary Fudge and Deidre. This is a great crowd. It's great to be here. I'm the federal program officer for NTIA, an agency no one's ever heard of, except for some industry folks, but the bipartisan infrastructure law funded NTIA with, as Administrator Burke just mentioned, with the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, to deploy high-speed internet grants and fiber optic cable around the country, $42.5 billion. There's also a nearly $3 billion bucket of funds called the Digital Equity Act funds. And there's going to be 2 different grant programs there. Ma'am? Oh, I apologize. Okay, great. Yeah, these are the bipartisan infrastructure law buckets of funds that Mr. Burt just mentioned that NTIA is administering. Now, each state has to come up with a BEAD plan, and without equity, it spells bad. The Louisiana, I can tout the work that Governor Edwards' office is doing in Louisiana. Louisiana is first in the nation to submit all of their reporting requirements, to drafting their plans. They've got great partnerships around the state with higher ed, the Louisiana Community and Technical College system. Governor Edwards funded a workforce development program a couple years ago. And so part of the state's plan with some of these BEAD dollars is to enhance that sort of that momentum at the technical and community colleges around the state to build out workforce criteria for some jobs that we're going to look at here in a second. But let's move on, because the main thing is the BEAD program is kind of the timeline here. We are in Louisiana, we're leading the pack. We've developed the initial proposal. That's the plan. And the initial proposal, what's unique about it is that we have to, the state has to come up with a plan that achieves 100% universal coverage. This is a universal coverage infrastructure program, and we're using grants to get there. So when this is done, there will be high-speed internet in every home and business in the state of Louisiana. Now, that said, that's kind of like the Tennessee Valley Authority, going back to the New Deal reference that Mr. Burt mentioned. The TVA was they built the dam. That was the diesel fuel and concrete and metals and labor, but then the Rural Electrification Administration came in later and helped show folks how to use electricity safely. That's what the Digital Equity Act bucket of funds will do. That's the social work piece of this thing. Everybody's got fiber optic cable, but you don't know how to use the internet safely, or don't know how, or don't have the digital literacy skills, or even have devices to use the internet. Then that's not 100% coverage, right? So, so those are the big pieces. And what makes the BEAD program a little different is that they have to create asset inventories. What are all the programs out there? What's Reconnect doing in Louisiana at USDA? It has to sort of organize all this and then present to NTIA the plan of how they're going to achieve 100% coverage. And we're on target in Louisiana to get this thing deployed, hopefully in early spring, or get it kicked off, because of the challenge process that's going on right now. It's where mayors and nonprofits and internet service providers are challenging the state map. Say, this is actually a location that needs funding. This is not one. The state will administer that and then start the subgrantee selection process next year. Now, internet service providers, maybe go to the next slide. I'm sorry, Ben, and go a couple further.
I don't have control. It's totally fine.
Sorry, this
Okay.
is great. So, so these are 12 different jobs that NTIA has compiled an amazing amount of research to show that there's going to be a deficit in almost every state. And these are the 12 jobs that are relevant to, I think, folks in this room to anticipate where the deficiencies are going to be. Now, this is not all BEAD demand. It involves all other infrastructure programs. So think about the CHIPS Act and all the other funding programs that were funded in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Consolidated Appropriations Act and the American Recovery Plan. It takes all this into account. And so this is intended to help states come up with workforce development curriculum training at schools. So I would encourage, all of y'all to be vocal and start up some conversations with the local tech schools, local community colleges, and and know that there's going to be a deficit. I think I've got some notes here of, just laborers and material movers in Louisiana. There's going to be about a 7,000 full-time employee deficit in a few years with all of these infrastructure projects kicking up. Now, we know in Louisiana what it's like when a hurricane happens and you drive to wherever 100 miles away, and at every exit, it's full of bucket trucks from Michigan and everywhere else. They're all coming to Louisiana to help with the recovery. It's going to be like that in a year or two in every state, when every state has the BEAD funds that are driving some of these infrastructure programs. So that's a long-winded opening, but I didn't realize we were having the slides. So I just sort of went through all that, and that's a good overview for now. And I can take some questions.
That's great. No, don't worry. That's a really good intro. Yeah. So next, Dr. Koluru, if you'd like to give an intro to the work you do as the Vice President of Research at the University of Louisiana Lafayette.
Thank you, Ben. First of all, I want to thank you for your work at NTIA and administrator work when you were the mayor of Chattanooga. You gave Lafayette, Louisiana a run for our money by establishing a model of how broadband connectivity and lifting translates into lifting of the communities and into socioeconomic mobility. So congratulations to you on your work then. Yes, Mayor Joey Jurel is a good friend of mine. He's the one that actually anointed me an honorary Cajun. So I'm very proud of that. I've been called a lot of names. That's one of the better names that I've been called. But the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do, obviously at USDA Rural Development, is significant and impactful. So I'm honored to be a part of this panel and to be at this conference. And I applaud Keith for his work in bringing together at a time when at the national level, the debate is between the choice that we are having to make between agriculture and energy, especially with the proliferation of solar, with the proliferation of winds. You see these conversations happening at state legislatures throughout the country, that we are having to rob precious farmlands, agricultural lands, arable lands for our energy needs of the future. The reality is we need our food, we need our energy. And I applaud Keith and the team here for putting together a conference that brings these two together and allows us the opportunity to look at things at the intersection of energy and agriculture and opportunity zones. What kinds of opportunities can we create by investigating things, by exploring? And I speak as a researcher and as a geek from the perspective of research. By what kinds of problems can we look at the intersection of these two areas? How might we create solutions that translate into innovations that translate then further out into economic development and jobs for all Americans, quality jobs for all Americans, which is what Justice 40 imperatives are all about. A bit of a background about the university, and I thought Ben did a fantastic job of giving an overview of the university. We are the second largest university in the state, right behind LSU. We're about 19,000 students. But what excites me the most about our students is how it looks like this room. We are not an HBCU. We are not a minority serving institution. However, 36% of our students come from underrepresented backgrounds. Nearly 39% of our students are Pell eligible, with 30% of them being full Pell eligible, which means that these are students that come from significantly financially underserved, racially, socioeconomically. 25% of our students are first-generation students. So for us, education is a ticket out of poverty, out of multi-generational poverty, for promoting social mobility of our students. So that's an imperative that we take very seriously. Also, from a research perspective, Ben gave an overview of the kind of work that we do at the University of Louisiana. We are home to the nation's largest non-human primate center. So we work a lot in the area of life sciences. So the first vaccine that became available for the coronavirus, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that was the solution for most people across the nation, across the globe, was worked on at the center at the university, where our scientists working in hand in glove with Pfizer scientists proved that the vaccine was safe, the vaccine was effective before it went into clinical trials in human beings and then was approved by FDA. So we work in the area of life sciences vaccine development. We were the first university in the country. We offered a master's degree in computer science back in 1962. So I tell people we were geeks before Big Bang Theory made it cool to be a geek. But we continue to build on that to be designated by the National Science Foundation as the nation's only center of excellence in the area of big data, data science, and are now expanding that to look at what the next 15 to 20 years or beyond will need us as a university to be focused on. And that is to define the future of AI and machine learning and how we manage AI and machine learning in the context of the changes that we are experiencing in society, the biases that we have to inherently remove from conversations that we have in society that then become data and input to AI and machine learning algorithms, biases in, biases out. You know that. The work that we do in the area of climate change, the nation's first known climate change refugees are 40 miles from the south of where we are. And one of my researchers at the university, Dr. Heather Stone, is the leading historian, documentarian of their transition from homes that they have lived in for generations to come. And because of the impacts of climate change, how they're having to pick up and move and lose their connection to their families and their communities and their culture. That is something that we as a university take very seriously. In the context of energy transition, we've been at the game of, I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana, which is, as most of you may know, is the hub city for the oil and gas industry. The tallest buildings in our community are named after oil and gas companies. The largest donors in our supporters of the university are in fact CEOs, CXOs of oil and gas industry. For 70 years, the university has led the workforce development and innovations in the context of oil and gas industry. But 2 decades ago, we knew that we needed to help that industry by innovating with the industry to move into renewable energy and clean energy. So today, most universities across the nation are on the bandwagon of clean energy. We've been at it for 2 decades. That is what has allowed us to be a driver in the area of solar research at the university, maybe next only to Arizona State University in the country in terms of the most comprehensive R&D programs. One of those examples is a company that we began collaborations with called First Solar 5 to 6 years ago, the nation's only domestic manufacturer of solar panels. What began as a research collaboration in 2016 translated 2 months ago, thanks to IRA, a major announcement from the company that they would invest $1.1 billion into New Iberia, into Iberia Parish, one of those perpetual poverty counties that EDA has identified. But that investment is going into the biggest success that community has had before this was a Kmart. This now is a $1.1 billion investment that is going into the community, thanks to what began as a research collaboration with the company 5 years ago, that translated into a workforce development collaboration, that translated into an economic development announcement that has just happened a month and a half ago. So where I want to leave you with is what we do as a public university, and our public is in delivering on our public good mission, is to make sure that we take all that we do well, all the bright researchers that we have at the university, point them in the direction of making sure that what they do in research translates to innovations, that translates to economic development opportunities, and into entrepreneurship to create the next generation of those companies that may come from minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, 8A companies, or whatever have you, and create the infrastructure, the systems and the processes, and the support that those entrepreneurs would need. And for us, that is how, as a university, we help implement Justice 40. That is, you talked about renewable energy as a Justice 40 imperative, digital broadband as a Justice 40 initiative. We talk about at the university, innovation that leads to economic development, that brings and lifts all boats, including minority-serving businesses, women-owned businesses, Native American businesses, as the way, as a modern research university, we fulfill our societal obligation as in contributing to those Justice 40 imperatives. I'll leave it at that.
Incredible introduction. Yeah, I would comment also that the main job of the moderator is to get out of the way of the panelists. They have a lot to share. So I want to hear your questions after Mr. Burke. If you give maybe a second introduction or a more narrow introduction.
Sure. Happy to say that was super interesting. Thanks for, I learned a lot during that. Let me just make 3 quick points. So the rural utility service has 3 divisions. We have water, telecommunications, and electricity. Those are the 3 areas. And we're the #1 funder of those 3 areas across rural America. Just in Louisiana in the last few years, done about $540 million in those 3 pieces. So the question was about opportunity zones. And for any area to thrive, the first piece is that you have infrastructure. We can ask our friends at HUD, people can't work without clean water, can't live without electricity, and in the modern era, can't live without high-speed internet. And so the way that I think about it is we work with communities to make sure that you have that basic needs, and then you got to figure out for yourself what you do with them, because it's not my job to come in and tell any community, this is who you are and this is what you, my job, especially because I come at everything from the local angle, as y'all probably can tell, my job is to make sure that whatever you want to be, we can make sure that you have the resources that are there to do that for self-determination. You are in charge. And Deidre and her team at the state of Louisiana, that's what they work on a day-to-day basis to say, what is it that is your particular need that we can help you with? The second point I just want to make is that in Louisiana, the issue of resiliency is hanging over everything. We all know that as we sit here, and in my trips down here, that's what I hear. And the 2 issues that we're talking about today are critical for resiliency. First, on the clean energy front, when you diversify your sources of energy and have different places, and you're not reliant on just one source, what happens is that if one place goes down, you can find some different areas to help you make sure that your energy is bringing people back up. The second piece is that one of the areas of technology that is greatly expanding is storage, batteries. And so particularly as we build out clean energy around the country and rural America, one of the biggest demands that we're seeing is for batteries, so that if you have a storm and you're without power for a few hours, you've got something that's built up and can power your grid while everything is down. Resiliency in that area is so important. And the second thing is, what's one of the biggest areas of resiliency is high-speed internet. Because when your building goes down where you work, when you can't get someplace because there's trees all across the road, had it at my house. My guess is everybody here has had this happen to them some point or another. What do? You pop online. That's what you do. If you're a business, how do you make it through the time when you've got things that are closed in your downtown? You sell your stuff online. Each of these areas is critical. And then the last piece I'll just say, which is just my fun little piece, is one of my best days in the federal government. Was that I got to fly on Air Force 2 to Louisiana with Vice President Harris. We flew and we went to Sunset, Louisiana. I got to be part of that, to fly on Air Force 2 with her, and seeing her, being part of that motorcade and driving up and seeing all the people out in Sunset, Louisiana, excited to see her with their signs out. It was just one of the great moments, and I get to brag to y'all that I was on Air Force 2 for a minute while I tell the story.
And I was in Sunset, Louisiana, while you were flying in Air Force 2. Yeah.
He watched him land. Well, that's really incredible, actually. So we've got time for questions from the audience. I have some questions as a moderator, but thank you, gentlemen, all 3 of you. My first question is for Mr. Johnson. You made me think of something. So you said there's going to be roughly 7,000 job openings without workers to fill it coming up soon in the state of Louisiana just for broadband connectedness. Yeah, so that reminds me in the nation, just a couple figures here. There's 27% unemployment amongst all formerly incarcerated persons. We have a 67% recidivism rate. And then in 2022, there were 11 million jobs roughly with 6 million applicants. So we've got a massive gap. There's a workforce development problem. And an economist that I work with at the Department of Energy to work in workforce development says that's going to factor out to 1%, roughly 1% losses if we do nothing to correct this, and if it does nothing to increase. And the problem is going to increase as baby boomers continue to retire. And that's going to translate to over $250 billion in losses if we do nothing about it. So that's just setting the scene for workforce development gaps for the state of Louisiana for broader. Are you under NTIA and Department of Commerce, are you doing anything? Well, of course you are, but what can you say to folks that are trying to make that close that gap in terms of broadband specifically, but generally for workforce development? Because there's a lot going on with the American Job Centers and Workforce Development Centers with the Department of Labor. What's most important for contractors, for small business owners, et cetera, to make a difference there?
Thank you for bringing that up. And Louisiana has the largest number of incarcerated individuals in the country. So, it brings up a good point that I left out in my initial salvo, was that another thing that makes the BEAD and Digital Equity Act grant programs wholly different from past infrastructure investments is that there's teeth in the Digital Equity Act that have to be in the initial proposal for BEAD. There's teeth that require the state to have meaningful consultations and ongoing communications with the 8 covered populations, and that's in the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. The covered populations are minority populations, veterans, rural people, rural individuals, incarcerated populations. There's 8 different categories, such that Louisiana is about 82% covered population.
Wow.
So this is different. These meaningful consultations are critical so that we don't make some of the mistakes we've made in the past. Like, in every city's got one, but New Orleans, you know, the interstate goes right through Treme, and it killed it's a test case in environmental law and administrative law classes, where it killed about 115 Black-owned businesses when it was built. And there's concrete picnic tables under there as kind of like, hey, we're making these picnic tables here, but nobody's sitting there, you know. But the BEAD program is different because of this teeth. The state has to work with the covered populations, and it's not just these demographics, it's geographical as well. So the equities spread out in the program. It's required, or NTIA can't approve it. It's not up to the standard.
That's good. I like how you said BEAD without equity is bad.
It's bad.
But if you were speaking to a local entrepreneur or a contractor trying to make sense of that incredible data, or trying to utilize some of the funding, what are some of the key takeaways for people working in those opportunity zones?
I'd say be in touch with the local nonprofit organizations who are close to that data and who are already working with the state broadband office to develop the plans, so that you're prepared to be a subcontractor to the internet service providers who win the bid for that project area, to serve those homes with high-speed internet, because it's not just the internet service provider who's going to be doing the deployment. They're going to need tons of subs. And you know, for example, one thing that's not included in this workforce data is call center, customer service folks. That's one major area that's not included in the deficit data. But look, right now it's a major outreach and engagement effort as the program shifts from planning and outreach to action. Next spring, we're trying to get press and trying to get the word out in so many ways. But I just say engagement, be in touch with me and the state broadband office and your local partners who know which school zones qualify for that American connectivity program that Mr. Berg just mentioned, which also Louisiana leads the nation as the most ACP signups in the country. That's the $30 internet program. So it's continue to engage and then participate in coming months.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. So we've got some questions. I have one question though, as a moderator for Dr. Kuluru and Mr. Burke. So you can both dive in, and then we'll go to the audience. I'm glad there's audience questions. So it's about electrification, energy storage, grid resiliency. 48E as the tax credit is called the Low Income Community Bonus Credit Program. This is available to for-profits and for the first time in the history of the United States now nonprofits through the direct pay program. Tomorrow the applications are open. There's very specific guidelines, but briefly up to I believe it's 50% of your wind or solar projects can be covered through tax credits after you build it. So you need financing on the front end, probably through a partnership with the developer. But there's a lot of unique strategies to do grid resiliency, microgrid, urban electrification, rural electrification through 48E and other programs. I would like to ask, excuse me, both of you through your unique and incredible experiences, what are some key takeaways for contractors, for business owners working to electrify their communities and opportunity zones?
So I talked previously about our research capacities, but what we also do at the university is to invest intentionally in some of our service centers. And I'm pleased to let you know that the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, I'll still call it that, PTAC, which is now called the DoD Apex Center. I have team there, Cindy Carrier and Hannah Lopez. If you guys want to wave your hand. All right, good deal. So this is a center that we have that is a federal program that is housed at the university. And what they do is to work with small businesses, minority businesses on a daily basis, help them connect with larger businesses that may have the opportunity. Ben, in your view, these might be the developers, these might be the mentors to the proteges that may be the small businesses. So in this case, in the case of 48E, I see there being distinct opportunities to put together co-ops of farmers, of Black farmers who may not have each individual large pieces of land. But when you come together as co-ops, and in Louisiana, there are a few co-ops already that I know at least one of those that the team at the university Apex Center is already working on. There is one that has recently come to my attention by the President CEO of the Louisiana Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which is our statewide Black chamber. And Don Craven Sr. just talked to me about another in existence. So we do have some of these co-ops, but bringing those co-ops together so that we can create the critical mass of land and resources for development opportunities and bring in these developers. And the university is very well equipped to support them to go after these kinds of opportunities to where they can take advantage of these federal resources. We are at an unprecedented opportunity with IRA, IIJA, and the various network of programs that the federal government, that the Biden administration has put on the street. Shame on us. And Louisiana is doing a decent job of taking advantage of those in the area of broadband, in the area of energy. We are participating, to your point earlier about grid resiliency. Louisiana is a state that's always looking for resiliency, and we are participating in the DOE GRIP program, which is about grid resilience and innovation program. So these are all the various ways in which the university is trying to move the needle. But certainly, I think in the context of 48E and opportunity zones, we are well positioned to work with the Minority Business Procurement Office, as well as with what we are doing with the DoD Apex program.
Excellent. Mr. Burke?
Yeah, so let me just give everybody a quick primer on how our energy money works. Because we have 7 different applications in from Louisiana. We haven't said which ones are going to get it, but we have 5 co-ops who've applied and 2 other types of entities. In our most ambitious program, we have something that says that if you build clean energy in your area, you get 40% off the top for a loan from us. So let's say, for example, that you build a $10 million solar array, right off the top, you get $4 million off, and we give you a loan for the rest. But that's not it. You can also get tax credits if you are a private entity. So that is usually 30% or more. Now, all of a sudden, that $10 million solar array has cost you $3 million or less. The big deal for co-ops and for nonprofits is that the Inflation Reduction Act tried to put nonprofits, people in cities, municipalities, on the same playing field as for-profit corporations. This is a big deal. And so what it did was it allowed you to get direct payments in lieu of a tax credit. So if you could get the money as a private corporation, now if you were a city or a nonprofit or a county, you could get the exact same amount in a direct payment to you from the federal government. So if a for-profit entity can get that $3 million, so can the co-op or the county. So just like it's $3 million or less for the private developer, it's $3 million or less for the nonprofit, or for the nonprofit, for the co-op, for the county. So what this means is all of a sudden co-ops that are owned by the members, right? It's owned by the people who live there and the businesses that are doing business there. They're getting $10 million on the books for $3 million or less. That's building real equity in rural America, because that's owned by the people who live there. This is critical, and this is how you save money for people off your electric bill, even as you make this transition to clean energy. So what does this mean? I told you earlier, we have $100 billion worth of requests for this. $100 billion. Probably going to end up doing, but our money will leverage about $25 to $30 billion worth of projects over the next few months. Somebody's going to build those. Every single project of ours is required, because the Biden-Harris administration is all about good jobs, not just jobs. Every single one of those will require the prevailing wage. Every single one of those jobs, that's really critical. And the second piece is every single one of those will require a community benefits agreement, because we don't want developers or co-ops or anybody else coming in and taking without giving back. And so making sure that we find ways to work with you, as Alex is talking about, each and every one of these is critical. I'll just say this again, but if you look at all these pieces, these are the greatest public works projects in 100 years. These are the greatest public works projects in 100 years. And the reason that I flew down here today is to make sure that as many people as possible are participating in this, because if it's been 100 years since the last one, it ain't going to be 5 years till the next one. Okay?
Yeah.
The moment to take advantage of this is now.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, just a point of clarification too, when he mentioned community benefits plans, 20% of the overall technical merit of all applications for grants, funds, loans, tax credits has to include a robust community benefits plan. And if they don't include that, if it's not robust enough, this organization, this program, this business will not be awarded the funding. So it's critical. And the other point about 48E tax credit is it has to be under or less than 5 megawatts. So anything that's above that would not qualify. So just something to keep in mind. We've got time for no more questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
We need at least one answer to one question. All right.
Last question, and then we've
Yes.
got to move on. Sorry. Thank you,
Hello,
gentlemen.
for the gentleman all the way on the far end on the right, Alex.
Ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am.
Alex. I heard you several times talk about the 30 million users. Do you have any data of for the broadband in Louisiana being number one? Do you have any data of how many minority contractors participate in providing those services?
I do not know that number off the top of my head, but I know that there's a Georgia-based minority-owned internet service provider that just got awarded a DoD contract to build out the internet, high-speed internet at all of the military bases in the state. And I know that they're actively every few weeks checking in on the progress, because they want to be a player outside or in some of these projects that they're building. I know there's a couple other minority-owned businesses that have submitted comments to the Louisiana's proposal, but I don't know that data offhand, because the state is working on that. It's kind of like a block grant. We're helping them with the plan, but it's the state's data. But I'm going over to the state broadband office right after this panel, and so I will find out and give you a call later today.
One quick question with a short answer.
Yes, sir.
How long do you anticipate the build out to be?
We've got a 5-year runway, or now 4.5. It's a 5-year runway that we have to get it done.
And I got to commend all of you guys for a great presentation. I would certainly ask that if you don't have to leave, you need to hang around a while because you have so much information to share with all of the attendees. And I've got to take certainly personal privilege with Dr. Ramesh because he's from my area, and they're doing a fantastic job at UL. The Accelerate program, which is represented in the back, does tremendous work with the underserved community. They actually have invested in the community. They've given it the time, the talents, and the treasures to make it work. And I think it could be a model program anywhere in the country. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being on the panel. And Mr. Moderator, all of you guys, thank you for your information. Hope that you will continue to share it as the day goes by.
Let's give it up for the panelists, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.